All right, this one's probably going to be a long one. I finally finished Crime and Punishment by Dostoyevsky. It is. I haven't read any Russian literature before, so this is my first time going into it, and I expected it to be very dark, depressing, dreary, and it was very disheartening, dour, all those D words that I had come to expect. The ending, however, spoilers for the ending, I did not see coming. I really didn't see coming. So I have notes. I have so many notes. There's so much to this, and I can't go through it all. I'm gonna try and go through the main plot, but I really enjoyed it. It was incredibly well written. I mean, obviously, it's a classic for a reason. It's remained so these past 160 years, because it is so great. And it felt so real. Like, maybe it's just because it's been so long since I've read 19th century literature, but the characters felt so real, which I guess I didn't anticipate, but that doesn't really make sense because why wouldn't they be real? So the main character, this guy, Rodion Romanovich Raskolnikov, also known as Rodya by his friends, which I like that. I like Rodya. There's a few of the names in this book I really like Sofia, not Sophia, Sofia. I love that name, Sofia. Anyways, so that's our main character. And going into this book, I had this vague sense that people really liked him and sort of resonated with him and were like, oh yeah, I'm just like Raskolnikov. Oh, I'm just like a wounded genius. And like even the back of this edition of the book says, it's a quote from the book. It's pain and suffering are always inevitable for a large intelligence and a deep heart. The really great man must, I think, have great sadness on earth. I feel like a lot of people, probably young people, read this and read that and think, wow, I'm really sad. Like, I suffer. I'm in pain. I must be a really great intelligence and have a deep heart too. I don't know. Like, to me, the main character is this. He's a psychopath. He is not someone to look up to. He is not someone to be like, oh, I'm just like him. Yes, I murdered an old woman and then her sister by accident because she just happened to be there. But oh yeah, no, I am just like him. I am such a broken soul. Like, I don't know. Did not get that. Although, as the book went on, you do start to sort of root for Raskolnikov, which is surprising. So yeah, so the whole plot of the book is he commits this murder, and then the crime, and then the punishment being, well, there is an actual punishment at the end, but part of the punishment is his guilt, and him dealing with the guilt and the fear of what will happen next. And his whole reason for killing them in the first place is well, first of all, it's because he lives in extreme poverty. Again, the poverty that they experience is something on a level that I have no contact with, no experience with, even though I don't consider myself even middle class. But anyways, they're extreme poverty. So his plan is, well, there's this pawnbroker woman. No one really likes her. She's just sort of leeching off the poor. I'll kill her. I'll take all her money, and then I can use it to better myself, and that will be a great thing. It turns out that he wrote this article before his murder, where he sort of put forth this thesis that there are material men and superior men. And material men are like the average, everyday, normal people that the law applies to. And these superior men are people who are outside of the law, don't have to follow the law, can break the law, and in fact should break the law in order to fulfill their great destiny or whatever. And he uses Napoleon as an example a lot, how people like Napoleon or Solon or any of those ancient or modern lawmakers, people who are creating laws, are by definition breaking the old laws in order to create the new laws. And so his whole argument is that if someone is one of these superior men, they can break laws, and it's not a big deal because for the greater good or whatever, laws don't apply to them. And so Raskolnikov, he sort of sees himself as one of these superior men. I don't know where he gets that idea. He's like a young student. He's 23. He's like I don't know why, what, but I mean, that to me that's very real. There's a lot of sad young men who are like, I'm special. I'm actually really intelligent and better than everyone else, and so the rules don't apply to me. Um, so maybe that's why people associate themselves with him. Um, so anyway, so that was his whole purpose. So, but then after killing, and he's like talking himself up beforehand. He's like, people who commit murders, they lose their heads during the murder, and that's why they keep getting caught. It's like if you keep a cool head and you're logical and you're smart about it, mine you won't have a problem. And so he goes and kills this woman, and immediately like loses his head. He keeps the door open the whole time so that the sister walks in, and then seeing the sister, who's seeing her dead sister on the floor, he then murders the sister. Um, he struggles with the key to try and find her money. He can't find her money. He finds some of the stuff that she was pawning, and so he ends up stealing that. So he's trying to go in to steal roughly 3,000 rubles. He ends up with like 40 rubles worth of stuff that he would have to pawn. So he totally loses his head. And not that I'm saying like, yeah, if he was smart, he would have murdered this woman and gotten away with it. But it's just it shows how people are so ignorant and think themselves as like so much better than everyone else. It's like, no, you're not. You're just another human. Yeah. So the book is all him dealing with this guilt, and then in the end, the punishment. Although I think the punishment is existent throughout the whole book. So maybe I won't go into the entirety of the plot because it is not complex, but there are is a lot to it. There are a lot of characters. I'll talk about some of my favorite scenes. Like after the murder, Roger he's standing on the bridge. He's looking down to the canal and he's sort of contemplating suicide. Right, and that's sort of a reoccurring thing throughout the book. And this woman walks up, sort of beside him, and looking as bedraggled and as worn as him, and just sort of matter-of-factly puts one leg up on the railing and then another, and then falls over the bridge, like to kill herself. And he's shocked by this. And it just happened like out of the blue. There was no, she was just sort of blank faced, just did it. And so people start shouting, and one of the police officers, I think it is, runs down to the canal and drags her out. And she sort of gets up, shakes the water off, and walks away. And just that scene really stuck with me because it's just the utter despair and the horribleness of this world, that people would just not out of the blue but would just try and kill themselves. And then the fact that they couldn't even do it, that someone pulls them out and then they have to continue on living. Even not that it would have been better if she had died, but just yeah, the level of it. Anyways, so that's one scene. So the other couple scenes. So there's this character, Peter. Peter, what's his last? Luzin. He's a real character. I don't want to use the word incel because that's a very anachronistic term, and I don't think that quite applies. But it gives me this sort of the vibes. So this Luzin guy, Peter, he's in love with, no, I'm sorry. He wants to marry Raskolnikov's sister, Dunya. So, Dunya and Pulcheria, Raskolnikov's mother and sister, they're equally poor. They're not crazy people though. They're trying their best. Anyway, so Dunya gets engaged to this man Luzin, who very full of himself. He sort of worked himself up. He's pulled himself up by his bootstraps. He's made money. He has money, and so now he wants to get a wife, and so he sets his sights on Dunya. And part of the reason he chooses Dunya is because she has nothing. She's very poor, and he's like, well, it's good to have a wife that doesn't have any money, but is still like educated and from good stock, sort of thing. And Raskolnikov's like, wants to marry you because you have no money, and he does. It's all about control. He just wants to control you. And Dunya's like, is that true? I don't know. And at one point there is a scene where Luzin, he does not want Raskolnikov around when he and Dunya, his fiance, are meeting. But she's like, I'm not choosing you over my brother. It's gonna be both, you idiot. So they all meet up for dinner, and Raskolnikov calls him out and is like, why would you say that you want to marry someone who has no money, and you're just doing it as an act of control? And then he sort of gets really upset, and then it turns out that the Dunya's former employer had died and had left her 3,000 rubles, and so um, she doesn't need his money anymore. She doesn't need to be engaged to him, but she wasn't only marrying him for the money, but she was sort of doing it as a self-sacrificing thing for the family to bring in money. But yeah, so there's this huge conversation where Luzin, he just makes a fool of himself, and it turns out, yeah, he's just a scumbag who wanted to marry her because he felt he could easily control her, and so he gets sort of sent out. But yeah, so Dunya inherits this money, which is the same amount of money that Raskolnikov tried to get when he murdered the woman. So if he hadn't have murdered this woman, his family would have gotten the same amount of money anyways and been set up fine. So yeah, that was kind of a tragic element to it. And another scene with this Peter guy, Peter Luzin, he goes to the funeral banquet for this man who Raskolnikov kind of became friends with because he met him once. And this man's daughter, Sofia, who Raskolnikov later becomes sort of romantically interested in. She, of course, had a tragic background. Her father was an extreme drunk and took all the family's money, and the family was destitute. And so what did his daughter do? His daughter went out, and her stepmother made some remark that, like, she should go into prostitution or whatever. And so the daughter said, well, okay, fine. So she goes out, comes back with like 50 rubles or something, and puts it on the table. And so yeah, so his young daughter becomes a prostitute to support the family. That's this Sofia. Anyway, so at this banquet, Luzin comes in, and he had met with Sofia earlier and given her a little bit of money to help because her father had just died, to help her and her step mother and step siblings. But he had secretly put in a very much larger note into her pocket. So then he goes to the banquet afterwards, and he says, well, I don't want to say anything, but one of the 100 ruble bills is missing, and you were the only one there, and I know you're desperate for money, so I think you stole it, Sofia, in front of everyone. And they're outraged, so Sofia's stepmother searches through her pockets and actually finds the 100 ruble bill. And Luzin's like, oh, I guess you are just like a cheap prostitute who just steals money from people and blah, blah, blah. And he's doing all this to discredit Raskolnikov, who had given all of his money away to this family to help with the funeral. But Luzin's like, no, he gave the money to the prostitute daughter because Raskolnikov, because he's trying to separate Raskolnikov from his sister Dunya that he wants to control. Anyways, it's a big convoluted plan, and it in any other book I would be like, oh no, here's like, this is sort of Luzin's villain arc. Like, this Peter guy, this is how it starts, and he's gonna get away with it, and we're all gonna hate him. But immediately, another man, Luzin's roommate, was like, no, you idiot, how dare you? I was there when you put this $100 bill in her pocket without her knowing. He said, I thought you did it as an act of charity because you didn't want her to refuse this magnificent gift. But no, you did it to try and frame her for stealing, so how dare you? So then Peter's all like, whoa, what? I don't know what you're talking about, and gets chased out. And that's sort of the end, the last time we see him, which is like great. Yeah, another interesting part is that roommate talking with Luzin before this. Luzin, I keep saying this name wrong, Peter. And they're discussing communism, but like the word communism, maybe it's just a translation, but that word hasn't really came up yet. I'm not sure if Marx has published at this point. I mean, this was published in 1866, but it's around the same time that this idea of socialism, communism is coming to the fore. So that's really interesting. And then Darwin, they mentioned Darwin at one point. So it's neat that this was written when these things were new. But yeah, it's neat hearing about communism from a Russian perspective well before the revolution. Another thing is like Russia has not had a good relationship with the U.S. since like the 40s, right? But the 1940s. But in this book, there's a lot of talk of America as that's the place you go. Like if you want to leave the country, you go to America. For a new life, you go to America. Because I mean, America in the 19th century was like a place of immigration. So that was interesting. So how does it end? I'm expecting it to end on a horrible, horrible note. I'm expecting them all to die. Like, a few people do die, and it is tragic. There is Svigrilov, Svidrigailov. I think that's his name. He is this like old creep who was in love with Dunya, Raskolnikov's sister, and he has tons of money and gives out a lot of the money. Basically, all the characters who manage to survive and have happy lives do so because of this guy's money. Anyways, but at one point he traps Dunya in his room in his apartment with the building empty, and it's like he's going to force himself on her. But she pulls out a gun and she tries to shoot him. She misses, and he just stands there and is like, reload, take another shot. So she does, the gun misfires. So he's like, no, try again. So she drops the gun and runs. He picks up the gun, realizes that she's never going to be with him, even though he loves her. He leaves and goes and shoots himself. So I think that's the only suicide. And he does it in like a really strange way. He goes up to someone. He's like, I need a witness, like a reputable witness. And so like he explains the whole thing. He's like, when they ask you, tell them that I said this and that and this and the other thing. And he writes a note and explaining like, I am of clear mind and blah blah blah, and then shoots himself. Which was strange. And I was kind of like, okay, well we're getting near the end. All the other characters, this is what's going to happen to them. But Raskolnikov, he ends up. He finally the guilt is too much. He's going to go confess. So he goes to the police station. He's about to confess, and then they're like, "Do you know that Svidrigailov? He just killed himself." And this is one of the people who knew that Raskolnikov had committed the murder. Was Svidrigailov, who had heard it when Raskolnikov had admitted it to Sofia. So Sofia also knows. And then Svidrigailov told Dunya. So those three people knew. So his sister is sort of the girl that he loves, and this other guy. But this other guy had killed himself. So then Raskolnikov's like, his whole plan that he like built himself up to confess, he then leaves the police office. As he leaves, he walks out and he sees Sofia in the distance standing and watching him. And she's a very religious person, and she's the one who wants him to confess. So just seeing her, he turns right back around, goes back upstairs, and says, confesses to the murder. And that's where the book ends, like right there. And I'm like, that's such a great ending. There's not like, it's like a few lines from the end is him confessing, which is just like, what a succinct way to end it. But they do have an epilogue, which I think is good. They do have that really nice ending, but then we need to see what happens next. And it's actually a very optimistic sort of a happy, there's another word I can use besides happy, but a very happy ending. So because he admitted it, and throughout the book he had done really good things. He had given money to the poor, and then they talk about some things he had done before the book. He'd saved these people in fire, and this sort of psychology as a new field is coming around, and there's this idea of temporary insanity. And because of all these factors, Raskolnikov is sentenced to 8 years hard labor in Siberia, which isn't that much. Which, interestingly, I believe, is what the author Dostoyevsky was also sentenced to. So I just found that a very interesting tidbit. I haven't read into that much, but that is interesting. So he goes off to Siberia. Sofia goes with him, and is sort of his constant companion and his sort of link back to Western Russia, in Petersburg. His mother and his sister. His sister ends up marrying Razumihin, Razumichin, who I haven't talked about, but is like just like the best friend that you could possibly ask for. So Raskolnikov's best friend, who falls head over heels in love with Dunya. So they get married, live happily ever after. His mother sort of gets sick and dies, which is sad, but she sort of can't deal with what happened to Raskolnikov. So she does die while he's in prison. But the final bit of the prison sequence is Raskolnikov gets sick, and I'm like, okay, he's going to die in prison. But then he gets better. But as he gets better, he realizes that Sofia's not coming to see him anymore. So I'm like, okay, Sophia's either going to move on or has died. And it turns out Sofia got sick, and I'm like, okay, so now Sophia's going to die. But then Sofia gets better. I'm like, oh, okay. I wonder if this is like a third draft where it's like, no, actually they get better. So when they're both healthy, Sofia comes to meet him at the prison, and they're sort of sitting next to each other, and they hold hands. And then Raskolnikov finally breaks, and his sort of psychosis, his mental, he's a real piece of work. But he finally breaks and like collapses throws himself at Sofia's feet and embraces her and cries over her. And he finally admits to himself and to her that he's in love. And poor patient Sofia's like, okay, finally. And then there's this such an optimistic end where they're like, they both realize how happy they are with each other, and they realize that there's only 7 years left in his sentence. They only have to wait 7 more years, and they could be together forever. Which I think is just what a great way to end it. So that again, I didn't use my notes because I could have gone into detail. There's so many storylines and so many nuances and so many different things I didn't talk about. But it is a fantastic book to read, and the happy ending makes it all the more like, I didn't know it was coming. In fact, I anticipated the exact opposite, which is I think is why I enjoyed it so much. But it was great. It was really like the characters, the character of Peter, the character of Raskolnikov. They seem like people that, like, I don't know people that I'm like, oh yeah, that's a Raskolnikov, but I know that enough of human nature and people are awful like this. So yeah, that was Crime and Punishment by Dostoyevsky.